This is the story of my forthcoming Hollywood blockbuster movie titled, led by his right arms. Its forthcoming novel titled, How His Heart Bleeds was written by Tyson Lee. Below is the full gist of the movie. Enjoy a happy listen. The soundtrack for this movie is titled, How His Heart Bleeds, written and produced by Ola Joe. Enjoy a happy listening as you watch one of the most original, adventurous, Hollywood Bible time miracle recap and blockbuster movie, based on a true life story. James was given a standing ovation. He was just an 18-year-old boy, what looked like a red-carpeted welcome as a youngster in his late teens who'd just secured admission into Michigan College. He wanted to be a medical doctor. On his first day in the classroom, knowing he was already a household name, having graced the front pages of some of the world's most famous magazines like The Newsweek, Times, Voice of America, VOA monthly magazines, and enjoying the rare privilege of performing in the White House, an honor rarely given to any artist of his age in Canada. He could sing and dance exceptionally to admiration and roaring cheer of an ever-growing fan base that never seemed to get enough of him. His rise on campus was even more phenomenal, enjoying the singular glorification of the status of an iconic singer and songster. The vice-chancellor, dean, lecturers never got a quarter of the attention, loyalty, support, and love he got from the students of Michigan University. Although he wasn't well-grounded as a believer in Christ, all the same, but he knew God as a child, as he could recount an unforgettable day when he visited a devilish church accompanied by an elderly woman who deceived his dad. That she was going to take him to an anointed man of God who was in fact an occultist. As this satanically anointed pastor prayed for him, he opened his eyes to have a peep of James' spiritual countenance, which was an effulgence of heavenly light for James, was an elect of God. It got to a point that he couldn't stare at him anymore, for this heavenly light that radiated all over the spiritual person of James was blinding and terrifying. This same so-called man of God begged everyone to take James away from him, for he was already going blind. James was immediately taken away from his sight, and the elderly woman escorted him back home. That was the end of the deliverance session. This was a case of when the deliverer himself needed deliverance. Like Mary in the Bible, James kept this spiritual victory and glorious encounter to himself, and he wouldn't tell his father or anyone anything about it. James pondered about this experience all his life. It made him to understand to a deal the deep and profound love of God for him. Oftentimes, James would be tempted to give her a beautiful hug and a passionate kiss, just as his other mates were doing, but something within him would prevent him from making the move. He knew very well the perfect will of God concerning chastity before and after marriage. His fallout with the fans and supporters in college began when lust, impatience, and foolishness took over his heart during the rain semester of his final exams. Until she took ill, Jennifer Hills was considered one of the most beautiful and charming lady any famous Hollywood celebrity would like as his soulmate and partner. James was madly in love with her, for she was his heartthrob and crush, always by his side when he performed his songs before his fans, something he devoted his entire teenage years to as a child star and musical prodigy. Their love grew amidst all the growing speculations that James Crawley wasn't making good grades in his exams, for he was already heading for a third class as he got carried away by the prompt and attention-starting, and wasn't in the good books of a good number of lecturers. The press and paparazzi also contributed to his fall. He could foresee his looming academic fall, and to be around her was the best thing that ever happened to him. She was such an adorable and tolerant lady, always encouraging him to keep believing in his dreams and that he could still make up for his bad grades. However, he went too far on his obsession with her, as during the rain semester of their final exams, he wrote her a love letter that was very childish, untimely, and uncalled for, telling her if only he knew she was always his, he could have been considered this move a disastrous one. He was now 26 years old, however. He went ahead to write a love letter on the day they were having their medical practicals, dressed in their medical faculty uniforms. At point when she was just coming out of a major illness by name anorexia, she had emaciated to a great deal and looked like a shadow of herself. And so the move was considered very annoying and thought-provoking. To compound his woes, he sounded too ridiculous, telling her silly things like he was going to go mad if she ever walked out of his life. She would make him quit music and the bliss of stardom if she left him. She got pissed off at this love letter that came at a time when they were few days to their final exams. She had emaciated to a great deal, but was on her way to complete recovery following prescribed medications and getting enough sleep as recommended. By her doctors, she read it on her seat and angrily took it to head of Department of Medical Sciences Discipline and department for which they both belonged. The name of this woman was Mrs. Chapman, a disciplinarian and no-sense middle-aged woman. Her fierce countenance said it all. Mrs. Chapman Scotland forced James to hand over the letter to her by his own hands before his classmates in the classroom section of her department. This was a very belittling act for James, who became depressed and had lost his masterful carriage on composure before his classmates, who were excessively fond of him and saw him as their face value, hero and music idol. They mocked him with their hand claps and laughed and booed at him, and now saw him as a foolish lover boy hopelessly fooling around with an obsessed affection for a lady they all looked up to as their academic role model. The news of his fallout before the head of department, girlfriend, and classmates spread like wildfire throughout the college. 2 days later, on the first day of their exams, his hands were visibly trembling as he held his exam papers. He couldn't even put down a word. He obviously wasn't prepared at all. He broke down and wept bitterly like a child as he sat down in an empty classroom. The thoughts of how Mrs. Chapman humiliated him came flashing back and forth in his mind. He let himself and his fans down. Soon afterwards, he suffered depression and was admitted into St. Mary's Teaching Hospital under the watchful eye of a set of satanically anointed doctors, who turned his body into their object of satanic exploit. Rituals and ungodly soul ties with his favorite music idol. It was fun for them, for they were satanic people who, like Satan, corrupted their wisdom for the sake of their splendor. They had mastered the art and craft of deception better than the devil himself. They secretly and mischievously injected into his body serpentine spirits that moved around him in form of steroids that made him appear to muscular and having the physique and stature of a powerful bodybuilder. They also changed his denture against his will. This they were instructed to do by the second personality of his favorite musician, Harry Holtz, a well-known spirit prince of Satan in the second heavenlies. Remember, it is writ. By him, all the things, visible and invisible, he created the things we can see from the things we cannot see, be it principalities, powers, dominions. All were made by him and for his glory. Ever since then, he couldn't sleep soundly anymore, and was constantly experiencing physical affliction from serpents the serpentine kingdom. They would move in his body and strike him. He could even hear their hissing sound moving round his body, meant to be the temple of the Lord. From this they meant for evil, but God turned it out for his glory. He replaced their ill affection and wicked schemes with divine deliverance of the soul of James Crawford's sweet divine deliverance, plan and purpose for his son. James wasn't well grounded as a believer, but he already knew God had set him apart for his glory. He just couldn't figure out God's plan and perfect will and purpose for his seemingly mega-star life as a famous Hollywood child celebrity. He got down on his knees to pray one faithful night, and God appeared in his room while he was on his bed. This all happened in form of a trance, such that his room was filled with the effulgence of heavenly light. Jesus empowered him for a heavenly assignment and disappeared in thin air thereafter. He woke up feeling empowered, and he forsook the music he once loved and career path as an entertainer who could sing and dance to the admiration and joy of a pleasure-crazy generation. Now, he knew fully well he has been empowered for a heavenly assignment by the Most High God, and he carried his presence everywhere he go. He would sing for God and God alone, bringing down his presence before a sin-sick world. The results of the final year, rain semester, came out, and James failed woefully. He wept bitterly as everyone stared at him in pity and disappointment. He put this experience behind him and chose to live for God, spread the gospel, and sing mainly gospel music for the sake of the lost. The following day, the Lord opened his eyes, and he could observe an epic spiritual warfare taking place in his home between the Lord's angel sent to protect him and an evil messenger and spirit prince from the kingdom of darkness. This battle took place in the second heavenlies. The angel was on his knees worshiping God when a highly positioned spirit prince from the kingdom of darkness stormed his presence. His appearance was frightful, marching majestically. To fight the angel of the Lord without wasting time, the angel cried in worship to God. And he was empowered from above, taken in flight, such that he came from behind as swiftly as the wind with a blazing sword in his hands, to cut off the horrible head of the proud and intruding spirit prince. An encounter and revelation that James Crawley would never forget throughout his entire life. He became a priest and forgave his father, who almost betrayed him into the hands of Satan, by foolishly trusting the senior consultant, by name Professor Jim and his fellow doctors in their medical unit. An action applauded by his gospel music fans, who were now part of his new spiritual family. That singular action inspired a good number of his former secular music fans to become Christians. The encounter was a standout one, very emotional and humbling. His father came to him as he ministered the salvation of Christ before his fans. He had just escaped what could have been a fatal accident, bloody but survived. Reminded that his days were numbered, and it was best for him to make peace with his son, who had several times recounted his undeserved and sinister treatment he got from the doctors who were supposed to have his back and protect him. James forgave his father, and he was grateful his father, once bewitched to have trusted such evil hands, now believed his own son was superior. Pleased by his singular act of forgiveness which he showed to his father, the Lord empowered James in such an unusual and marvelous way, such that he gave him the power to conquer the attack of the fierce and anaconda-like serpents, by giving him the power to emit fire from his hands and legs, with a current of electricity, a rare gift that killed the large brood of serpents, anacondas, from God that only the angels of the living God could possess. The victory was masterful and terrifying. It was a Bible-time miracle fit for an Hollywood blockbuster movie, but in this case directed and produced by the Lord God, Jehovah Almighty.